Justin, I remember hearing on Takedown Breakdown that your first ever wrestling that you ever saw was WWE ECW.
That's incredible memory. Yeah, my cousin introduced me to it. I watched a Hardy Boys versus the Full Blooded Italians match.
All right, that was probably all right.
It was all right.
The FBI at that time was Nunzio and what the fuck was the other guy's name?
Big Guido?
Was it?
No,
Big
Little Guido was Nunzio.
Vito.
Was it
dress.
Vito? Oh, was it Vito?
So they did
I
a
don't
whole
think it was
I
like.
thought it
Vito
was
in
that
the
other
dress.
guy.
No,
Who's
I'm
that other guy?
Tony Mamaluke.
Tony Mamaluke.
Tony Mamaluke.
Okay.
Yeah. What?
That sounds about right.
So this was the period in the 70s when the FBI was going after the Italians.
No, the FBI, the full-blooded Italians. It's
a merger.
It was a stable in the original ECW that they hired those guys for the WWE ECW, and they did bad mob movie knockoff gimmick characters, but whatever. Little Guido, as he was called, and eventually stopped calling himself that for what I hope are obvious reasons. He was a very good wrestler.
The original FBI also had Tracy Smothers, who was clearly not Italian.
No,
right?
not at all.
So Lil Guido isn't Nunzio.
Oh, he is.
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
That's the same guy.
So who is his tag partner then?
I think
Tony
it was
Mamaluke.
Tony Mamaluke. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I
Glad we
think
established
it's important to remember that even if you aren't Italian, it's not racist to do an Italian accent, and so it's fun.
I'm Italian and I can't do an Italian accent.
And then
it's just my name.
I picture my
Say
grandmother screaming at my grandfather, and my grandfather not caring in the slightest. That's my Italian. Like, Morris!
Family.
Oh, Lucy, we're good. No, you're good, Grandpa. She clearly was not good.
I come from an extremely Scottish family, and a Scottish accent is not easy to do if you're not used to it. And so, like, I can sometimes, if I've been around my grandparents, like, I can sort of get into a zen state and kind of do an impression, but otherwise, if I do it, it can be very embarrassing. While I was in Scotland, a Scottish person put me on the spot and said, "Oh, do an accent," and I was about to, and Laura stopped me. And then she was like, "Oh no, we gotta go. We don't have time." And then later on, I was like, "What happened?" She was just like, "Well, a lot of times if you're not good at it, you accidentally do an Irish accent." And I figured that would have been really offensive, and you would have felt ashamed of yourself. And I was like, "Good call. That's why we're married."
You gotta keep
these
it
are
like,
my people.
Yeah.
they won't touch me.
The cultures around the world, including like regional ones within America that are the most similar, get the most offended when you imply that they're the most similar.
Oh yeah.
They also
And,
tend to
like-
hate each other the most.
Yeah, like as a New Yorker, it's like I can spot someone from New Jersey and they can spot me, and like we could be friends.
I
but
can
like
smell them, too.
Yeah, but if you're from anywhere but this region, it's like you New Easterners, you New York, New Jersey guys. It's like hey. That's completely different. No, it's not. It's not completely different at all.
People claim that that they can hear an accent difference between like Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island and no, you can't.
It was
all,
more
it's all
prominent
the same.
100 years ago, if you really want to get into the weeds of it. But yeah, nowadays it's like various New York accents because we mix.
Maybe it's the
That's what we do.
slang that kind of differentiates it.
Maybe.
I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Speaking of getting into the weeds of it, you're listening to Contesting Wrestling, a podcast where we do just such a things. That's not a good introduction. My name is Evan Burke. I am a writer. I am mostly a podcast editor these days. And I am somebody who's on a quest to understand wrestling, to have it explained to me by my cohorts, by my co-hosts, and occasionally by a guest. So today we're gonna dive into. Well, I guess let's do our introductions first, and then we'll get into what we're diving into today. But I will say we are leaving the WWE for a while, and it feels really nice.
Breath of fresh air.
Anyway, my name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been in the professional wrestling business for well over 10 years. I'll do a more accurate count at some point. I do wrestling, I manage, I do commentary mostly these days, and of course this podcast, and I like explaining wrestling to people, including Evan, who I've known for a very long time. Evan, once you described to me years and years ago that I was very good at explaining wrestling to people who didn't like wrestling because I didn't just start going on and on about, like, the stuff you don't care about. I could succinctly be like, this is what I think, and this is why it's cool. Now we can move on to something we both like. And that has changed now that I'm telling you about wrestling all day.
I will say really the genesis of this podcast, there were a few things that led to it. But one of it is that over the years, I've always been impressed by however little I cared for wrestling personally, I could really hear you two guys talk about it all day and not get tired of it. And so I thought perhaps the public will feel the same.
Sure.
I, the other guy, am Dr. Ben Abelson.
Professor, the other guy.
That's right. Professor of philosophy at Mercy College, a wrestling enthusiast. And as a professor, I guess it is explaining things is my business. So I'm glad that you think that I'm good at it, in this case at least. And today we have a very special guest, Justin Caracciolo. He is a student of wrestling at the House of Glory Wrestling Dojo, and he is one of the co-hosts of Takedown Breakdown on 90.3 WHPC, the radio station for Nassau Community College. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you for that introduction, Ben. You pretty much covered all bases with that. I was going to say I was a wrestling enthusiast, but you stole it from me, so I will proclaim myself the outlier. Here we are.
All right. Well, so you are all currently studying to be a wrestler.
That is correct, yeah. I'm a student.
Oh, where are you training, brother?
As you mentioned, at the House of Glory Wrestling School.
House of Glory Wrestling School. Cool.
I've been there since last December, and it's been a great time.
With the Amazing Red.
Amazing Red. He's having a bit of a moment at this time, as I understand.
That's true. He will be back, actually, in action at House of Glory this Saturday. That might be dated at this point.
Oh, yeah. We record way in advance. Red had his comeback match at House of Glory several weeks ago. It was great.
Yeah.
The
fans rejoiced.
The fans were so
They hopped
happy.
the barricade,
They
threw him up on his shoulders.
7 stars.
Streamers, pyro. The whole 9 yards.
He did the code red, and hopefully nobody else on the show did.
And his opponent,
Everyone.
his
And
opponent
by the way,
walked
if
to
you've
the
never heard
back
of the
of shame.
Amazing Red, look up the Amazing Red. He's a real unsung hero over the last 20 years in wrestling, and if he didn't have several poorly timed injuries, he would have been a much bigger star. He's very influential, very influential.
Often imitated.
Yeah, check out his match with Low-Key from the first year in Ring of Honor. We might even make Evan watch that someday. It had some crazy stuff.
Or check out Will Ospreay's Twitter feed.
Yeah, Will
out about
Ospreay.
it.
Yeah,
Big Red
his
supporter.
recent match with Will Ospreay got a lot of critical acclaim for New Japan Pro Wrestling.
That was in the Super J Cup over the summer.
So kind of in keeping with the very vague format that we've had in other guest episodes, I'm going to pick your brain a little bit about what led you to your current status in wrestling.
Sure.
And then we'll dive into the really interesting matches that you picked for us to watch today.
Okay.
What led you to go sign up at a dojo and start risking your life for the entertainment of others?
Well, as the introduction stated, I started watching wrestling when I was about 8 years old. My cousin got me into the sport.
Around when was that, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm going to say 2006.
All right, 2006.
Yes.
Post-crisis, as I like to put it, after.
I did not live through the Attitude Era. I didn't see any of that live, so I have a bit of a skewed opinion on all of the topics. I'm more of a
It's
modern.
amazing how many wrestling fans can't conceive of anybody not having seen the Attitude Era live, when in fact it's almost 20 years old now.
Well, I mean, also I feel like the wrestling fan base is really old.
It is. If and I'm not going to get too far away from your story, but something that Dave Meltzer reports it all the time about how the ratings for the WWE skew way older, 40s and 50s, and that really matters. And the ratings for AEW Dynamite skew really young, 18 to 25. It's not that young people don't like wrestling; they don't like the WWE as much as people used to. And a lot of the fans that are fans of the WWE have just been watching for decades. They just haven't stopped.
We discussed this on my show. It's actually really interesting that people are starting to look into these alternatives. They're sick of the WWE product, and that's been gone over hundreds of thousands of times.
But I still think the AEW fan base is pretty old. It's not mostly teenagers and
they
people
have
in their
the-
early 20s watching.
I would imagine
people
they
in their
have the
30s.
old WCW fans kind of on board because they recognize the name Rhodes. They'll see, oh, that's Dusty's son.
Right.
They'll see Dustin Rhodes, the Natural, who did great on Dynamite this week, which will also probably be dated by the time this comes out.
No, they
And-
actually do very well in the 18 to 35 demo, way better than WWE does. It's not a really old audience for Dynamite, is what I'm saying. We don't have to wonder; these numbers are there.
I will say, as somebody who this is going to be the first episode that comes out since I started watching some serials. Doc and Ben have me watching AEW and NXT, so So far I've only watched the pilot of AEW Dynamite, which will be like months old at this point. But I did, having watched a bunch of WWE without having a whole history of being a wrestling fan, and then having watched AEW Dynamite, the difference is night and day. Even if it seems like largely the same, like just in terms of the vibe, just in terms of how the commentators are talking about the wrestlers, just in terms of how it's shot, how like it feels very much. It's kind of what I was looking for, at least in the sense that it's a lot of the things that I like about wrestling so far, and it seems to not have a lot of the dumb shit that bothers me.
One of the things that I think you'll notice about the difference between AEW and NXT is that in AEW, the individual wrestlers are kind of doing their own thing.
Yes.
There's a lot more just individual input. Whereas NXT, as much as I think it has a lot of virtues that the mainstream WWE stuff doesn't, it's still all being programmed by the same people at the top. So, yeah.
It's a lot more canned.
Yeah. So anyway, the matches that Justin chose for today came out of a challenge that I laid down calling into Takedown Breakdown.
Hold on.
Okay.
I interrupted a little earlier. You didn't actually get to your history a bit.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So where I left off, I'll actually interject a funny story into this quickly. So as a result of my first viewing of wrestling, I became a big Hardy Boys fan, particularly Jeff Hardy, which I imagine most people were a bigger fan of because he was the risk taker. He was more out there. And going on a few years, he would have a pretty decent career in the WWE. He became WWE champion, which I supported. And then he got into a feud with someone known as CM Punk. I'm sure, Evan, you're familiar with him by now.
I've seen
all over the place.
I've seen one Punk match so far. I saw him and Daniel's match.
Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, sorry.
Was that Over the Limit?
Money in the Bank.
Okay. From 2012.
With AJ Lee as the referee.
So this was a precursor to that, but
Okay.
it was unrelated. So Jeff Hardy was in a feud with CM Punk, who cashed in his Money in the Bank, and Jeff Hardy was chasing the championship afterwards. There was a championship versus career match inside a steel cage between Jeff Hardy and CM Punk, and upon CM Punk winning the match and Jeff Hardy losing his career, I took one of my CM Punk action figures outside and repeatedly slammed it with a metal baseball bat, which was followed by me getting stung in the face twice by a bunch of bees. So,
Oh, shit.
Bad day.
yeah, very, very weird circumstances surrounding that, but I guess I deserve it because now I'm a fan of CM Punk, so I'm a hypocrite.
I was just gonna say, I guess the bees were big fans, and they saw what you were
Yeah.
doing, and they were like, "We can't let this happen."
No.
Like this, yeah.
That was a really auspicious storyline because I actually the steel cage match was preceded by a ladder match, TLC match
at SummerSlam, correct?
and I randomly met CM Punk on 14th Street right before that ladder match.
Before his match, so
Ju-
you're
or,
like
days
"You're gonna do
before the
great."
match. So that whole time period has an interesting feel to it.
Now,
for me.
were you an active kid? Were you somebody who like ran around and got hurt, or is it really difficult for you to do dangerous, like to train yourself to jump onto people?
Well, I engaged in certain sports when I was in high school. Like in particular, I played lacrosse, and I find snowboarding to be a fun hobby of mine.
Okay.
You know, so I engage in certain athletic activities, but I wouldn't say I'm very coordinated at them. It was just really my passion for wrestling that drove me to the point where I was like, I'm going to pursue this. I saw that there was an open house for House of Glory, and 2 months prior to that, I was looking to sign up anyway. So I was like, this is my chance. I'm going to go. I'm going to check it out.
Awesome.
And I fell in love with it once I got there, and it's been great ever since. I've been there for about a year.
And like they say, you do it or you don't do it. You know, there are everybody wants to do it. A lot of people have make plans to do it. Doesn't matter. You get in or you don't. It's
That's right.
pure binary.
It's hard to get out afterwards too.
Yeah, you're never really out.
Now, what's something that, I feel like everybody who comes to an art form along that kind of path, where like they love it, and then they're just like, you know what? There needs to be like this. Like, why doesn't somebody do this thing? Oh, fuck it. I guess I'll just go do that thing. Is there something that you want to see, that you want to bring in, or are you just kind of more on a path and sort of seeing what happens?
Well, that's kind of the philosophy behind the character that I've been portraying, at least on a small scale for our student shows. I've been portraying a character known as The Difference because I'm used to people saying, hey, go and find something that's different in pro wrestling, find something that nobody else is doing. And rather than looking for that, I just decided to personify that saying of the difference, which is also an anagram for subtraction in mathematics. So there's that.
Okay, so
Look forward to more.
Well, so what is
Synonym, yeah.
what is the what is the difference? What is the nature of the character?
Well, more literally in the sense is that I want to bring change to pro wrestling because I've seen the way that it is now, and I want to alter it. I want to change it to how I see fit. Certain pro wrestling, like certain styles of pro wrestling appeal to me and certain styles don't. And the styles that don't, I'm looking to fix that and benefit the overarching wrestling community. Of course, right now it's on a small scale because I'm just a student. But like, for example, the Lucha Bros, I'm not sure if you've seen them yet in AEW.
I have not yet.
Well, they are a tag team that came from the Lucha Underground promotion that I was talking to you a little bit about earlier. And they kind of are just a bunch of big moves, which is the Lucha Libre style in a way, where it's like they don't take a rest, they don't stop. So
They don't sell.
they don't, yeah, exactly. They're perceived to be bad workers from, I guess, an insider's perspective. I'm a fan of their work, but at the same time, I can see like the flaws that they have in their style and everything like that.
I was actually going to do the Bucks. I wanted to do the Bucks Lucha Brothers ladder match as a bad match coming up.
Oh, I could totally
I think
understand.
we'll contrast that with TLC 2.
Oh, that'll be fun.
That's a
that'll
good
be
idea, yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun.
What's an example of? Is there anyone out there who you feel like is really just nailing it, like really getting it right?
Absolutely. Kyle O'Reilly is my favorite wrestler in the world. I think he's amazing. He has
Kyle
great
O'Reilly.
mannerisms. He has a great style. He personifies everything that I would want to be in wrestling. Additionally, I'm a big fan of Mark Haskins, who's in Ring of Honor right now.
You saw Kyle O'Reilly on NXT this
Okay.
week.
Most
He's
likely.
one of the undisputed era.
He was one of the tag team champions.
Okay.
The smaller of the two guys and the younger one.
He's my favorite of those four.
Yeah,
as
those
well.
four guys in my mind as well. He has a lot of personality. It's not as in your face as some people's. Like it's a little subtle, but once you see it there, you notice like he does a lot of little things right too.
And he also has like a lot of MMA background. Like I don't know if he did actual MMA, but
It's
he's
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
he's
I
trained
believe.
in jiu-jitsu. Okay. Yeah, and you see that his style is very realistic feeling.
I remember like towards the end of the time that I would be going to Ring of Honor shows, he would be near the bottom of the card, being him and Adam Cole would be teaming as a Future Shock. And I remember one of the last Ring of Honor shows that I remember that I went to was when they had their match, and one of them like got like busted open bleeding really early in the match, and it was clearly not supposed to happen. But they bled buckets, and it added to the match so much that the crowd went from sleeping to loving both the guys.
I think that was
Remember?
Cole. I think
Yeah,
that's
Cole
what really
bled.
got Cole over with the Ring of Honor crowd.
Well, he just rolled with it, like the time Eddie Edwards did that ladder match with the broken arm, which don't do that, but he made it work.
Yo, they were fucking crazy in Ring of Honor back in the day.
Yeah, they really were.
On an unrelated topic, well, semi-related, just to tie everything back into PWG, I think another thing that I find interesting about Kyle O'Reilly, the Undisputed Era is the faction that he's a part of right now, where typically he would be tag teaming with Bobby Fish, was the tag team champions with him. I believe he got hurt last week. But in PWG, Adam Cole, who's the leader of the faction, I guess technically the leader of the faction, held the PWG championship. And then Kyle O'Reilly was the one to dethrone him after a long time, which also happened in Ring of Honor at a later date. I believe PWG happened first. And then following that,
O'Reilly won the ROH title?
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
and then
traded
he
it with Cole.
Totally
he
missed
lost
that.
it at Wrestle Kingdom in the Tokyo Dome.
Oh.
Back to Adam Cole.
Back to... Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
He won it at Final Battle in a really good match. I have it on DVD. So then Kyle O'Reilly held the PWG championship down for a while, which is a great period of PWG that I really enjoy. And then he lost it to another stablemate of his, who would be Roderick Strong. So the title got passed around between three members of the Undisputed Era within maybe one calendar year, which is just an interesting, nugget of information.
Tons of history. We saw, Doc and I saw Cole, O'Reilly, and John Moxley all debut for Dragon Gate USA at the same time back in 2010, was it?
Whenever the first Dragon Gate USA shows were,
Yeah.
it didn't last.
It was before, yeah, as far as I know, it was before they wrestled anywhere else on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That was like their real kind of debut in this market. All right, so the matches we're talking about today came out of a challenge that I laid down to Justin on Takedown Breakdown, where Justin had said that he considered PWG to be the best wrestling product of the millennium. And I challenged him to come on the show and give us a couple of examples, still, fitting into the good match, bad match formula in a sense, but a couple of examples of what makes PWG really great, why he thinks it really is on that level. I was claiming that I thought the peak of Ring of Honor in the 2000s, for me, was the best wrestling product. But this is what Justin is presenting to us. To begin with, the good match is the Young Bucks versus Joey Ryan and Candice LeRae, the so-called world's cutest tag team, from PWG. That's Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Guerrilla spelled like the Spanish word guerrilla, but they pronounce it Guerrilla. In a guerrilla warfare match, spelled the same way.
Which, in case listeners don't know, is the kind of warfare that where it's sort of a clandestine during a war between two unbalanced powers.
Yes, the Vietnam War is where I think the term originated.
No, I'm going to say that it probably
it was
something.
No, it originated in the Napoleonic Wars when Napoleon tried to conquer Spain after telling Spain, let's conquer Portugal together. And Spain is like, sure. So Napoleon moved the French army into Spain and was like, well, now my army's in Spain. And the peasants of Spain were like, well, now we're hiding in the trees and picking off your officers. Screw you.
Not to be confused.
Damn,
wow, damn.
I'm trying to learn history a little better. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that the losers had to perform a mating ritual with a gorilla. So thank you for that.
Well, that is that is
is
the
that like
cause,
wrestling a bear?
Yeah.
That will be the cause of the future guerrilla wars, which will come
Guerrilla
which will destroy humanity in the 2030s.
So this match is from PWG 11 is the name of the show.
The 11th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
On July 26, 2014. And it is for the PWG tag team titles, which were held by the Young Bucks at the beginning of the match.
Yeah.
Is the world's cutest couple, is their deal that they're an insufferable hipster couple?
The world's
deal's that they're
cutest
not a
tag
couple.
team. They're not a couple.
Okay.
And
They make
everybody,
that distinction.
and not only is it like, oh, they're not together. It's like everybody knows that they're not a couple, and everybody knows that Candice LeRae is with another wrestler, and their relationship has nothing to do with wrestling.
It's purely
You know what I mean?
platonic.
Okay. 'Cause I was
No, yeah.
I was only bringing it up because I didn't watch any of the pre-match anything, so I was just trying to glean their characters from what I saw in the ring, and it struck me that at least the two they would be funny if their deal was that they were like an insufferable hipster couple that insisted on also being a tag team.
It's even
as
more
much as the word
pretty good,
hipster
yeah.
means anything in 2019.
It's
but,
even more confusing because for many years Joey Ryan was married to Laura James,
Who looks like Candice
who looks
LeRae.
a lot like
lot.
Candice LeRae. Joey Ryan actually proposed to Laura James in a match, and then when she said "I do," he rolled her up for the 1, 2, 3 while she was distracted.
In his own promotion, bar
Oh,
wrestling.
wrestling. Yeah, the guy
They're not
that,
together anymore.
The guy that Candice LeRae is with looks nothing like Joey Ryan. He's shorter and uglier.
Though in looking for research,
He is.
though
Johnny
doing research for this episode, I found that Johnny Gargano, who is the wife or the husband of Candice LeRae,
Yeah.
they had a match on the 2014 Battle of Los Angeles, which is the show involved in our second contest. the
Oh,
bad
hey, how
match.
about that? I bet you it was
So,
good. I've never been the biggest Gargano fan. I like Candice. Candice is great.
Yeah.
Candice
she's
is my
amazing.
favorite part of this match. I've never been the biggest fan of the Bucks. I don't think that they're bad. I'm not one of those like the Bucks are killing the business guy. Like that's stupid. I've never been the biggest fan of their style myself.
Understandably, I have
Same here.
I have a spiritual connection to the Young Bucks because I was a member of the Chris Jericho cruise last year.
Really?
I thought
had
it
the
was because
honor.
you were a big Hanson fan.
You mean
used-
Ivar?
They used to come out to Mbop.
They did
in Jakarta back in the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I don't know if you know what mbop is, actually.
No, I actually can't contribute to any of this at all.
I'm pretty sure he was
I'm a
born
little
after
lost.
that was a hit, Ben.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
That was
My wrestling mind immediately correlated to War Machine when you said Hanson. So,
Oh, no. Oh, Hanson and Rowe. Sure.
Well, they're
well,
great.
Ivar and Eric,
Ivar.
the
yes.
Viking experience.
Yeah. The Viking Raiders now, I think.
Yeah, something like
Their
that.
finisher is the Viking experience.
The bad match is a 10-man tag team match from
It's not a
the
bad match.
2016.
the quote unquote. Yeah, it's actually
It's
the
not.
most.
It's
It's actually
great.
the most amazing match I've ever fucking seen.
It's from the 2016 Battle of Los Angeles, which is PWG's annual tournament.
Night 3.
This is night 3 of the tournament. So after, most of the people have been eliminated from the tournament, they can just like put them together in goofy matches like this.
This would be the first round opponents that lost. So the people who didn't advance in the tournament get placed in kind of like a scramble match.
So on one team, Team Champa, we have Tommaso Ciampa, Matt Riddle, Sami Callihan, Pete Dunne, and Brian Kendrick. And their opponents are the legendary Japanese wrestler Jushin Thunder Liger, Tommy End, who is now known as Aleister Black in WWE, Jeff Cobb, Cedric Alexander, and Chuck Taylor. The so-called Bro Cat Psycho Kitties. And we'll talk about why they were called that in a little bit.
So let's just pull back for a sec. What is the deal with PWG? I had never heard of this promotion, and then I see 2 of the best fucking matches I've seen since we started
Wow.
doing this.
I like
Okay,
to
so
I like
that
to refer to
pick
PWG as like a boutique federation. Like they don't run a whole lot of shows. Every one of their shows is like a crazy supercard, like major league, not WWE contracts, but like most other major league contracts have had over the last like 8 or 9 years, clauses in them with certain people that, okay, I'm exclusive to you, but I can still work PWG because wrestlers that are artists go to PWG to just go completely balls out and be like, this is the craziest stuff that I can do. And they all just try and top each other at all of the shows. And it's ridiculous. And if they had like 4 hours of TV a week, it would be total burnout, but they don't. So there you go.
I think being in Southern California, they're well situated to get wrestlers from Japan and from Mexico and more easily than further north in the United States. And so if you watch the Battle of Los Angeles every year, you will see a new crop of wrestlers who will be big stars within a year or two after that.
Everybody in this bad match, so-called, has been signed by a major company. All of them.
For a brief summary of PWG, it was a company started by 6 investors, being Super Dragon, Excalibur, who's the guy on commentary for both these matches.
And for AEW.
Yes, also AEW, Dynamite. Joey Ryan, who was in the good match this episode.
Who you are wearing a shirt of
Yes,
currently?
I am.
Joey-
A YouPorn Joey Ryan shirt.
I was
Yes.
trying to. I was like, this looks very familiar.
We'll explain why that is.
Well, that's very simple. Joey Ryan is officially sponsored by YouPorn.
I had to wear it here because I'm embarrassed to wear it in public.
There you go.
So, Joey Ryan is actually the only wrestler in either of these matches who is not signed to a major company. And it's because he's making so much money doing his own thing that he turned down contracts from
Is
both
he not in-
AEW and WWE.
Is he not in Impact now?
Oh, is he an Impact?
Well, you said a major company.
Oh,
well,
But yes,
Sami
he
Callihan.
he did sign a contract with Impact because Impact gives him the freedom to do the other stuff that he wants. A lot of people
Like
are
pro
signing with
wrestling.
Impact now because of their non-restrictive deals. Because they do tapings every few months. They don't do live events.
Sami Callihan is only in Impact then as
Yeah.
well. So,
He had been in NXT.
right.
And he,
that
and he
didn't really
left.
work out.
Yeah.
He was a hacker. Also, Scott Lost.
Whatever happened to Scott Lost?
He was really good, really
Chris-
talented,
Chris
and really
Bosch
crisp.
was his partner, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was Photogenic, Chris Bosch, and they were the X Foundation. That was early days PWG. Scott Lost, from all accounts that I know of, just couldn't do it anymore. Like, not that he couldn't do it anymore, but he had no desire to continue
Yeah, yeah.
wrestling and kind of just left the business.
It wasn't making it for him.
Same with Chris Bosch. I believe he did the same thing.
Yeah.
Disco Machine, and I might be getting this wrong, but I believe Top Gun Tall War was the last
Those
investor.
were the investors. Okay.
Yeah, the original 6 investors. And then from there, they started from like really humble beginnings. They hired for their first show AJ Styles, who's a big name in the wrestling world, and they tried to pick up as much independent talent at the time that had name value attached to them, and then from there work their way up.
This
to the
is
company they're in now.
2003.
Yes, was when the company originated. If you check on High Spots, the events on there start in 2004, though. So their earlier shows are taken off for reasons involving mostly Excalibur on commentary, because he has very dated references and vulgar language and insinuations.
Maybe not great by 2019 standards.
He's
Or probably even standards of the time.
He's by all accounts apologized for everything that's happened since then, from what I know. So
I noticed they were fairly forward thinking in that, on the indies, one of the fun things about the indies, at least back then, was wrestlers could use whatever theme music they wanted, because no one was going to sue them for it. But PWG was smart enough to not include the entrances in their videos, because they knew that was going to be a problem with licensing going forward.
Very smart on that.
Also, I find a lot of indie guys that do that, not a lot of them, but some of them use it as a crutch, and that's their whole act, is dealing with this licensed music they have no claim to. And that's stupid. It's stupid. Your whole act can be taken away from you like that, and you'll be in the wrong.
One other thing I've always liked about PWG too is creative tag team names. They really go for it.
The Unbreakable Effin' Machines is one of my favorite. That would be Brian Cage, who's the Machine, and Unbreakable Michael Elgin.
I did notice in terms of avoiding copyright issues, they do a modified suck it motion. The Young Bucks, they do a suck it motion where their hands do not cross in front of their genitals, but merely frame their genitals.
Well, that was sort of the original suck it before it was DX, because the NWO kind of did it too.
Well, all of the Click guys did it. To your point, though, Evan, the WWE eventually told the Bucks they had to stop
doing any suck it.
Too Sweets
doing any
also.
suck it's also like the Too Sweet hand gesture, because all of that was trademarked.
That's when
they were doing that.
You can't copyright the suck it motion.
You can, actually. You
Good
can't
God.
copyright it. You can trademark it for specific purposes. For wrestling purposes, the WWE owns the suck it and owns the Too Sweet.
That's why Pinky Sanchez and Joey Janela started saying "suck me," which is so much more vulgar.
But the WWE doesn't have a trademark on it.
Got really uncomfortable when you said that just now.
Pinky Sanchez's Twitter handle is @suckmepinky.
So there was a big court battle in the mid 2000s between Diamond Dallas Page and famous rapper Jay-Z, because Jay-Z started doing like a diamond hand signal on his albums and stuff. And Diamond Dallas Page had been doing that on television since before Jay-Z started doing it. And Jay-Z, being a very good businessman, was trying to shore up all of that trademark. And he ran into Page, and Page is like, nah. And Jay-Z is like, well, I'm bigger and more powerful than you are. And Page is like, you don't know me. And Page ended up winning. He did a lot of research, found examples of him doing it on television over and over again, specifically in service to his branding of his entertainment of it. And Jay-Z had to either stop doing it or start paying him for it.
Since Justin mentioned Super Dragon, I think this might be a good time to mention the Super Dragon mask that plays a role in the match that, Evan, you might not have understood the significance of.
No.
So Candice LeRae picks up this mask and puts it on, and all of a sudden becomes super hardcore and starts beating the shit out of one of the Young Bucks.
She uses the violence party in the corner, which is just a series of chops and forearms repeatedly.
Super Dragon is a fucking psychopath. And he just kills people and takes insane bumps.
People includes fans.
Yes.
Also.
He doesn't still wrestle, does he?
No, he's the
retired
owner and
years.
promoter of PWG,
He
I believe.
he
Murdered
innovated
enough fans that they were finally like, you should maybe not be out on the front lines.
He innovated the curb stomp finishing move, which was a reference to American History X. Right.
Yeah.
And the Psycho Driver, which is now used by Bianca Belair.
But
To much less success.
She's very good.
She is good. She's the EST. She's the goodest.
It seems like PWG kind of does, it seems like if that is their strategy, it seems like they kind of deal with all of the things that I don't like about wrestling, which is mainly like better to put something out every 3 months that's all killer, no filler, right? Like I would rather watch something 4 times a year that's 2 hours long and the whole fucking thing is great than tune in every week for something that's an hour and a half long and there's only 20 minutes that's worth watching.
They do a great job at not oversaturating their product. They keep it fresh every time and they send out, in order to watch a PWG event, you typically have to watch the DVD if you want to see it as soon as possible. You'll see the DVD, but that will be months after it happened.
Yeah.
So on Mixed Opinions about the Young Bucks, there were dueling "fuck the Young Bucks, let's go Young Bucks" chants in this match. But there really is this diversity of opinion on them because this sort of over crazy spot style where it's nonstop spots. There isn't a lot of selling. There might be a lack of psychology in the matches. And I think the Young Bucks embody that.
So I've noticed in AEW in particular, like you were saying earlier, their TLC match, a lot of, like you said, the storytelling kind of gets thrown out the window in favor of bigger spots and what will please the crowd, because now they're performing to a much bigger crowd in AEW where they're filling stadiums as opposed to PWG where they're in front of a bunch of hardcore fans that no matter what they do, they're gonna get a reaction,
and who are following the stories very closely.
Yeah, almost
as opposed to
event.
the AEW fans who might have just shown up for some wrestling.
We should also mention to Evan that PWG tickets are very expensive and sell out really quickly. I don't know if that's
they could run
but
much bigger buildings, but instead they decide to go like the $100 ticket route to keep the atmosphere. They have moved into a slightly bigger venue than what you've seen, but we're talking the difference between 300 and 500 people when they could fill.
My friend Arthur, who lives in LA, has been trying to get PWG tickets for years. I don't know if he's ever succeeded.
The fact that, this is an amazing show. When they go out and wrestle in the audience, they are extremely careful about it. Like, it seems very well practiced. Yeah, I don't know. I'd pay a lot for this. And especially, the crowd very clearly demonstrates, especially more in the second match. To me, at least, they really clearly demonstrate how passionate they are. That, maybe when you have slightly more expensive tickets like that, the people who you're getting are the people who are really into it, at least in theory.
Yeah.
I love the frenetic pace of this first match.
Yeah.
The crazy start where the first thing we see is the Young Bucks trying to dive and Lorraine and Joey Ryan hitting them with chairs.
Yeah.
That's the very first image in the
I think
match.
it was garbage cans that they met them with in the middle of the ropes, right?
I thought it was chair. I have chairs in my notes.
There's a lot of garbage can involved in this match, so I might be mixing up a few spots
They
here
start, if you will, in the middle of Act 3 and just kind of stay there for most of the match. It's all of this crazy stuff, boom, 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 spots. They do tell a little bit of a story through it all, but I don't know. I don't think they told too much of one. Candice sold.
Oh, yeah.
The others really didn't.
Candice to me was really the star of this
Yes,
match.
I would agree. The Bucks were heels in this context, right?
I would say so. They really just kind of show up and do their act.
Well, at this point, they were members of a stable called Mount Rushmore, which was a faction of the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, who we mentioned earlier as part of the Undisputed Era, Kevin Steen, who was on commentary at this point, and I'm not sure if this was before or after Super Dragon's involvement, but he came back to pro wrestling just for maybe a year to get himself involved in this angle.
And besides Mount Rushmore, they were Bullet Club affiliated at the time as well.
Yeah, that's
they're wearing their
that's
Bullet Club stuff.
that's where that connection with Adam Cole comes from.
So they're the favorites to win the match. Basically, they're the aggressors. Lorraine and Ryan are fighting from the bottom, so they're the baby faces in that sense.
Now the Bucks have a lot of character, in their faces and when they're going around. They're very aware of who they are and what they're doing. Production value isn't the paramount in something like PWG, although they do well with what they have. But a couple times you get a good shot of one of the Bucks' faces, and they really look evil. Properly,
Well,
they are a well-oiled machine. They are clearly, as much as I'm not a huge fan of theirs, they are the most prominent and probably the best tag team of the last 10 years, purely because they concentrate so much on being a tag team.
Their whole Young Bucks character is also some real hipster irony. In a sense,
by now, yeah.
Even from the beginning, they're sort of a throwback to the Rock and Roll Express and the Rockers and these fresh-faced, young bucks. But they always, meant that a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
But there is a real arrogance to their characters. There is a real, they seem to be wrestling from a perspective of we should be winning this match because we feel that we are better than you.
They feel they're the best tag team in the world, and they've been claiming that for years.
they also got this reputation for being these arrogant young guys who didn't want to play by the rules of the business. They didn't shake hands backstage. They pissed a lot of people off over the years. But at the same time, they're known for being the guys to like sort of fight for the rights of the rest of the locker room. I think, Doc, you were telling me they're the ones who will go up to a promoter and demand that everybody get paid and that sort of thing.
Yeah. They don't want to be on shows where people are just being mistreated. And they always thought that the best way to do that is to make sure they're being treated as well as possible and then show everyone else in the locker room how well they're being treated, which could come off as being arrogant, but it's more like, no, we're putting on this show. We should be the ones benefiting, right? And as illustrated by what they eventually did in the business, the WWE wanted them. The WWE made them a good offer. They weren't, I'm sure they entertained it. But instead, they went with some of their friends and helped found another major league where they could just do things completely differently. And like a lot of respect for that, because if they gained the power from the ground up to do things differently, and now they're using that power to try and affect change. Fantastic, you know?
The Young Bucks are also reportedly responsible, allegedly, for the involvement between Ring of Honor talent and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla that's existed for a few years. So even now, like, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla feels the need to go out and scout for talent, because a lot of the major players now are getting scooped up by NXT, AEW, and New Japan and stuff like that. I believe New Japan's still allowed to work, but the reason that Pro Wrestling Guerrilla still involves itself, like their champion right now is Jeff Cobb, who's a star in Ring of Honor, and that working relationship between the Young Bucks, Ring of Honor, and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla still exists to this day, even without their involvement in either company.
The relationship between New Japan and Ring of Honor as well, I think, had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, due to the Bullet Club involvement, whereas they were contracted to Ring of Honor, but they were appearing on New Japan shows, and they became a faction over there.
Though, of course, them all pulling out of Ring of Honor to do AEW really kind of fucked Ring of Honor. But they fucked themselves in a lot of ways, too.
Well, it seems like that for a very long time it was the WWE and everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
And then now, you've kind of got these like middle players where you've got AEW, who are maybe not as big, but still have a lot of money, and they're on TV, and they're, basically the second largest thing in the country.
They're a major league, unequivocally. Yeah. They're a major league.
And then even NXT is arguably sort of this middle player in that it's still the WWE, but it's a thing that wrestlers would feel more creatively satisfied working there. It's great for your career. It could lead to, getting onto the main shows. So I guess that probably makes it a lot more complicated than it used to probably just be a very simple us and them thing from the perspective of indie promoters.
There are way more full-time jobs in wrestling now than there was just a few years ago. There are way more companies that are offering contracts, both exclusive and non-exclusive. And this is good for everybody in wrestling, including the people at the bottom, because then the people who have been really talented without deals and contracts finally get scooped up, and then maybe they're not taking the top spots at your local indies and people could grow. I kind of reference like post-crisis. It's like I kind of consider when WCW and ECW went out of business to be just that. And then when the WWE then absorbed them, for the next year and a half to 2 years, most of the big names that debuted in the WWE were already known quantities. They were people who came through WCW or ECW because all of them had their time freed up because their companies went out of business. And that left this huge pool of young and hungry talent with no place to work, which is what brought about the founding of PWG and Ring of Honor, and the rise to prominence of CZW and Chikara, and what would later
TNA.
be and TNA, yeah, of course, and
Impact.
What would be? It was very TNA at the time, and it was it's what would eventually become to be known as the prestige indies, because there's just as much talent as ever, but no jobs. Now it's kind of the opposite problem. There's a million jobs, so talent has to develop and keep moving. And every time the major leagues clear out the PWG roster, PWG happens to find the next 24 best wrestlers in the world and puts them all in the Battle of Los Angeles.
They have some of the best scouts on their team for PWG. I would say on level with Gabe Sapolsky, who's also has a very good eye for talent, because they always bring in new guys. Like nobody ever heard of Jake Atlas up until they brought him in. And all these GCW guys who started appearing up in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, it gives them that platform to perform on a bigger stage. And now you see guys like Jake Atlas getting a contract, and Bandito made his name in PWG.
Right. He's great.
He's in Ring of Honor now, you know?
So back to the match. There's just a lot of fun stuff here. The Young Bucks they pull out a bag, which wrestling fans will generally expect to be full of thumbtacks. Because that's a thing that happens fairly regularly. But in this case, it is not thumbtacks, at least not at first. It is gummy bears. And so they do the moves on the gummy bears and sell them like they hurt like thumbtacks. And
They sell the gummy bears harder than they sell the more painful objects that come out later, which just makes it so much better, I think.
You've got to sell them hard.
And then especially when there's a point where one of the Young Bucks suplexes the guy in the other tag team onto
Ryan.
Ryan, suplexes him onto the gummy bears. It's a whole thing, and then once he rolls away, the Young Buck grabs a handful of gummy bears and eats them in front of the audience. And I
as you would with thumbtacks.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's the same. It's the exact same thing.
Well,
maybe if you're Nick Gage.
They did do the thumbtack spot later in the match, and they fed a few of them to Joey Ryan.
Yeah, or if you're Joey Ryan at the end of the match.
Now, this is the first real like quality intergender wrestling match I've seen. We've seen one other one on this podcast, the absolutely horrifying Vince versus Stephanie McMahon match, which was one of the most depressing things I've ever seen in my life. And this is something that I had the thought before, like, why don't they do this more often, right? Because it's not like it's an actual contest of physical where there's like any sort of a reason to not have it happen. And I was concerned. I was like, I guess maybe there is something to the idea that like you're still depicting violence against women, which is not great, but at the same time, like, I don't know, like the female wrestlers, they clearly are like down to do it. The match is fucking great. And also, like, there's no reason to not have intergender fighting and wrestling, because it makes a great show.
I feel like intergender wrestling is something really difficult to get right, though, because either you have the guy win and he looks like an asshole, so he's got to play the heel in the match, or you have the girl win and it's like, oh, she's our hero. You know, I've had one match in this as part of the student show, and it was an intergender match, and it was kind of tough behind the scenes to like come up with a conclusion to the match. Inevitably, she went over, which I think was the right decision.
I've seen matches where the guy goes over where, you know, the woman is clearly outmatched from the beginning, or you would expect her to lose.
There's a really famous match online of Chris Dickinson against some female wrestler, and it's like tough to watch, but it has like 23 million
with
views
Kimberly?
on YouTube.
The one where he power bombs her like all horrifically, because like she's really proud of that.
I mean, I saw a match.
It has like 23 million views on YouTube,
that's
so I was kind of taken back by that. For
Chris
a small
Dickinson,
promotion.
like Chris Dickinson is one of the things that he made his name on is like being the guy in intergender matches. And, like, he knows he gets a lot of heat for it. He knows he always has. He knows there's going to be a certain amount of people that's just like, oh, you just get your jollies beating up women.
Makes him a great heel.
Yeah, right. Well, the women wrestlers he works with are happy that he treats them with enough respect to go, equal with them in the ring. And because the real solution to this is just to have enough intergender wrestling that we have men and women on the same plane within professional wrestling. The attitude from like wrestlers is like, well, you don't blink when Black Widow beats up the bad guys in the Avengers movie, even though there are some like, she's smaller than them. Yeah, who cares? It's a show.
She has superpowers, right? And if you think about wrestling in that sort of comic book sense, where they have, it's not entirely real. It's not real.
Yeah, the Undertaker
so they can have
superpowers. Right?
So
why not Candice LeRae?
But but even you might even see people who are physically, pretty well matched, like women who are very strong, and the men aren't always that big.
Tessa Blanchard.
So her match with Sami Callihan was great. I recently saw David Starr wrestle Mercedes Martinez.
That was a great match.
And Starr is the heel, but at the end of the match, he wins after a long, grueling fight where Mercedes, she pushes and pushes and pushes, and she ends up losing, but she shows how tough she is, and the crowd is very happy with the result at the end.
Whatever concerns I had initially about the appearance of violence against women in these matches and stuff. I mean, it was really I was, I felt like those concerns were put to rest by you guys talking to me about how every single woman that you know who wrestles on the indie circuit is chomping at the bit to do these intergender matches.
It elevates them, if anything. They're standing in there with.
They're not like, oh no, a man's gonna beat me up. It's like
that's
not how wrestling works.
It's just, this is my opponent.
And these days, those are some of the most interesting matches because, like, the dudes are kind of boring. The women are so much more exciting for the most part in wrestling in general these days, I find.
Depending on where you look.
That, like, the guys need them to get over at this point. But also, in this match in particular, Candice overcomes, right? She gets beaten bloody, but she ends up victorious in the end. And that's like a really cool story to tell. Even if you do think it's a depiction of domestic violence or anything like that, the fact of overcoming that shit and transcending it and being the winner in the end is kind of a cool message to send.
This match lost me for a second because at a certain point, one of the Young Bucks unveils So at one point, Thumbtacks come out, actual Thumbtacks come out.
And then the shoe with Thumbtacks sticking out of the sole of the shoe.
And he puts that on, and he kicks Candice in the face with it.
Yeah.
And she's bleeding profusely. And I had a moment of this might actually be too much for me. I really don't know how I feel about this. And then about 2 minutes later, she's basically shoving Thumbtacks into the crotch of his pants and then suplexing him in such a way where it's clear there's a lot of pressure going on
from his balls
to his crotch.
It is actually called the balls plex.
The balls plex, perfect.
So she did a balls plex and Joey Ryan did a boob plex. Because they were always in intergender matches.
Ideally,
so
they do it at the
suplexing
same
women.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For
Standing
maximum
next to
effect.
each other.
I was just by the end I was like, and she looked fucking triumphant in that moment afterwards, and I was like, all right, this match brought me back.
Well, she's a star. She's in NXT now. And
she had a great match with Io Shirai.
Yeah, she had a great match with Io
Unreal.
Shirai. She's probably not going to encounter any more Thumbtacks while she's in the WWE, but who knows? They've done Thumbtacks before.
She also, you mentioned the Dickinson Kimberly match, Justin, but she was, there was a couple of spots in PWG I've seen where I think Roderick Strong just flung her in the air and she landed on a chair in a really awkward, painful looking way. She was really, I think, the first woman that I was aware of just getting ragdolled.
She's hardcore
in matches. Yeah,
she's super hardcore.
Before we move on to the post-match stuff, I just wanted to mention one spot in the match, which is when Joey Ryan gets hit with the garbage can, kind of tossed into him, kind of like a garbage bag almost.
Yeah.
And it goes straight into his head. And I had two thoughts when this went on. First, I was thinking, holy shit, that must have hurt really bad. And then my second thought was, wow, that's how they make pugs. And then after that, they put the trash can on top of Joey Ryan. There's a 450, and it looks like the garbage can just demolishes his face. So that spot also I wanted to bring awareness to, and the indie taker to the outside.
Oh, God. And I love how I think Excalibur calls it unbelievable, just like Vince McMahon would.
Yeah.
That was the indie taker, not the Meltzer driver.
The Meltzer driver is a
has the
flip.
450.
Only the Meltzer driver has the flip. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that the four-person suplex thing that happened? I keep calling everything a suplex. That's the one move.
So he does the tombstone on the outside of the ring.
Okay.
And the one young buck and the other young buck jumps out of the ring to spike the tombstone down.
I also love the zoom-ins on Nick Jackson's face in this match. There was two of them, one at the beginning and one right before the indie taker, where you see the look on his face oh, I'm a sadistic fuck. This person's gonna die.
But you know what I'm talking about, right? There's one point where all four of them.
It's like a Tower of Doom kind of thing.
Where it's
that's the indie spot. It happens in every multi-person indie match in one way or another. It's a cliche at this point.
Oh, okay. Well, it's new to me.
Yeah, it's great.
You were at the Progress show in New York, right?
Yes.
So,
the first one.
Yeah. Do you remember when Keith Lee did that spot and Austin Theory was holding someone up in the air in the suplex, and it was basically a Tower of Doom, but Keith Lee was holding the power bomb, and Austin Theory was suplexing maybe Mark Andrews or Mark Haskins. That was probably the craziest.
They they did the same thing in NXT a few weeks ago with Dijakovic and Roderick Strong. And it was even more impressive that time because they almost lost it.
Oh, I remember
and
that.
And
in
they
the
almost
threat.
all fell to their death, but they were good enough to hold on and save it. I want to show you that triple. That's one of the more recent great triple threat matches. Because
that was good.
I've
has
enjoyed
been liking
Roderick
triple
Strong
threats.
with the North American Championship. I think he's been very strong.
I just want to mention there's an article out by a woman named Esther Chiamachilli about intergender wrestling, about whether it promotes violence or empowerment, that deals with a lot of the issues that we just talked about. I just saw it today, so Google that.
It's a great read. Yeah, read it before we started.
A couple other things about the match before we move on. So Kevin Steen kind of ruins the finish a little bit. So Kevin Steen is on commentary. It's right before he was about to go to the WWE. And he has some really good calls. Like, for instance, when all the weapons are coming out, he says, what else can they pull out at this point besides their penises?
Which Joey Ryan might do.
Which Joey, right, because that's kind of his thing. Well, not pulling it out, but he has become known for penis-based offense in the years really
Sounds
since
like
this.
a good strategy. I mean,
It's effective.
yeah. Who
Against
wants
everyone except his wife, Laura.
So, but Steen kind of drops the ball for a second because Candice, I think she blades on the outside before you see the bleeding, but she does a really good job. She comes in the ring with her face her hair covering her face, so that when she takes the thumbtack shoe, it looks like that's what busts her open. But I think Steen wasn't quite privy to what they were doing there. So he says, hey, I think Candice is bleeding, like before she takes the kick. And he tries to save it. I think he realizes his mistake. And he's like, oh, I mean, I saw some blood on her leg. But he's already kind of fucked it.
I was assuming that there was some kind of trickery involved in, like, the tax stuff. I was also going to ask, like,
The tax are tax.
Well, yeah, no, I guess in terms of, like, with the face kick and stuff, I was like, they're probably not landing a direct kick.
No, the stuff with the strikes is probably a lot more controlled than they'd like you to believe. The landing on tacks is just landing on thumbtacks. They go a little bit into your skin. They probably hurt a lot, but they won't really damage you.
Well, I was going to ask, like, is there a pressure to do that kind of stuff? Is there?
I mean, I've never been pressured to do that kind of stuff. There's not really, like, they'll ask you, like, you want to do a hardcore match? And then, if you want to do a hardcore match, you do a hardcore match. It's really up to the individual if that kind of thing gets suggested and you're not comfortable with it to say, look, I'm not taking the thumbtacks, because it's not that common unless you're in a place where everybody's doing it. And if you're in a place where everybody's doing it, like, and you don't want to do it, work somewhere else.
It's got to have a worthwhile payoff, I feel.
Well,
You
yeah,
can't
I
just
think-
waste it on every show. It's
Well,
got to be a big
right.
moment.
I
And
mean,
this
one of
match
the
had that.
One of the big problems is when people who are really new, who are big fans of, like, hardcore wrestling, will go out to small indies where they're probably not getting paid, and they'll do that in front of whoever wants to come and see it, and it devalues everything.
The other thing is, like, you have a feud that builds in intensity, builds in hatred, and it should also build in violence to represent that. And so you end up with a guerrilla warfare match, right, in order to blow off a feud. And there is an expectation that the stakes are going to be raised in some way. Now, how specifically you end up doing that, what specific spots you use, that's open, but they're going to have to kind of go beyond in some way.
I mean, this did seem like a really effective use of it, because in the past, some of the more hardcore stuff we've seen, I'm like, it starts to drift too much into the territory of why I don't really like MMA, kind of, where, like, it just starts to be too much like two people just hurting each other, which is kind of not what I'm interested in watching.
Right.
But I thought this was really well done, because, like, it wasn't that much. It kind of came out towards the end of the match. They didn't, like, spend too much time on it, and it really, like, it made me uncomfortable, and then they pulled me back, and I thought that was really effective. Where, like, I had a brief period of, like, dissonance of, like, I don't know if I still want to watch this, if this is still good. And then they used it in a way that it got really interesting.
And I don't know if that's entirely unintentional. You know, I think
I
that
would
might
ma-
have been kind of the idea.
I felt I would imagine that it was. Yeah, it felt
As
like
we
it was.
discussed with the Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar match, the point of the first half of that match was specifically to piss off the crowd, not like in a heel and babyface way, but they wanted to make the crowd think, oh, the league is screwing us again, and we're not going to get the match we wanted to see, so that when it started to turn around, you get the feeling you only can when it's real hope.
Yeah.
Is what it is. It's not fake, and now the hope spot. No, it's real hope.
It kind of just occurred to me, sort of how well the gummy bear bit played into that, because
it's a fake out.
they're like, oh, we're gonna have gummy bears. This is a fun thing, and then a few minutes later, it's like, all right, no, it is going to be taxed.
We need
We
the
are
thumbtacks.
actually going to be in a lot of pain and bleeding.
We haven't won this match yet. We have to pull out the
Yeah.
thumbtacks.
Justin, did you want to talk about the aftermath of this match?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll give a brief summary of what happened. So Kevin Steen comes down to the ring really slowly, picks up the Super Dragon mask, takes a look at it because that was a big rivalry in the early days of PWG. I'm actually about to watch one of their Guerrilla Warfare matches between Steen and Super Dragon. This is kind of Kevin Steen's send-off before he goes to NXT and eventually WWE, where he is now. And he gets inside the ring after the celebration of the World's Cutest Tag Team. And Adam Cole comes to the ring, affiliated with Mount Rushmore, which would be the Young Bucks as well after their match. And Kevin Steen, he's kind of just draped over the ropes, kind of just taking it all in because this is his last appearance.
He's wearing Young Bucks pants.
Yeah, I believe he wrestled earlier in the day in that uniform, and then went to do commentary. And Adam Cole gets on a microphone and he says, "Kevin, sorry, we love you," which is a callback to WrestleMania 24, where Shawn Michaels super kicked Ric Flair in his retirement match. So it was kind of just a play on that in the indie scene, and of course the super kick coming from Shawn Michaels' Sweet Chin Music. It's kind of poetic in that way, and that was Kevin Steen's
All
send-off.
wrestling fans will get that. You know, like
Yeah. And then Adam Cole went on to eventually go to NXT, and following War Games, which recently happened, he led a team that was opposed by a mystery partner being Kevin Owens. So
Yeah.
it all comes around in the end.
Yeah, this was, I feel like, a very sort of transitional moment for all these guys from the indies into
Well, Kevin Steen leaving
mainstream
PWG is a big deal.
Yeah,
Leaving independent
yeah.
wrestling in general is a big deal.
the kind of guy who, given his body type, you might have thought never would have gotten signed a few years previous.
Yeah,
Because he's just too small, or
No, he's just too fat.
you
The
know,
opposite.
regardless of his athletic ability, I remember he did a long form interview right before he got signed, as a lot of guys might do, just about his career. And they were like, when the interviewer was like, "I know you can't tell us exactly like what went down, but like you went to the performance center for a tryout, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Man, we heard like we always hear about like how hard it is." And it's like, "Yeah, you know, it's all this working out." And they drill you, and then like you got to do it again. And they're like, "Can you do the crazy cardio drills that they have?" And like without hesitation, he just goes, "Yes, of course I can." It's like, yeah. With his gut out to there, he can, because some guys just don't lose the gut, and like he can, he's done it before,
It's
but like
Willie
it's,
Mack.
yeah, but it's this huge thing for him to lose some weight, and he's just as athletically good whether or not he has a gut in front of him, and they know that. They always push him good.
So you know how you reacted to Samoa Joe as like, oh yeah, it's cool that it's just kind of a fat guy who like, you know, is really athletic
Yeah.
and he reminds me, you know, he looks like the audience. And Steen even more so
Yeah.
looks just like your average freaking
Oh,
wrestling
we'll have to
fan.
watch that. I
Yeah,
love
he's
I love
cool.
a graceful fat guy. And
He's-
it's also just I feel like as time goes on, we figure out more and more that like being fat is not exclusive to being a healthy athletic person who can do
There's
stuff
a
like,
Venn diagram of those two things that overlap, but they're certainly not. It's certainly not just a circle.
It's not like if you're kind of heavy, you're just going to sit around with your thumbs up your ass, which makes a great transition to
The 10-man tag. Loaded with an insane amount of talent, possibly the most
Okay.
talent ever in a 10-man tag. You would expect an incredible match from them, and you got one, but not the one you would
All right.
expect.
So yeah, I gotta. All right. So at first, I started watching this match, and I was like, okay, you know, I've seen a lot of these, you know, multi guy pileups. Basically, I was watching it, and I was like, you know, everybody in this is talented, They were doing these cool little 2-person exchanges. But honestly, I was kind of checking out. I'm like, there's too many guys. I'm not too into this. I'm like, yeah, I guess this is another bad match. This is another too many people bad match, and I'm not interested. And I'll be honest. At one point, I kind of pull my phone out, and I'm just like, all right, thinking about the other crap I got to do before I leave today. And then I look up, and like the guy who's dressed like a Japanese demon character or something is
Red
like
Power Ranger, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
sort of.
okay, maybe this is the time. So Justin thought that you would describe the match this way. Why is the Red Power Ranger leading a human centipede of cats up his ass?
I wish I had thought of that, because that's actually a lot more creative than this. But
That phrase has since evolved into a human centipede of prostate examinations, which is a bit more accurate.
So you saw Jushin Thunder Liger, Japanese wrestling legend, one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, if not the single most important pioneer of the light heavyweight style.
Bet you
Yeah,
wouldn't
we
have guessed
didn't
that.
Pointing at his ass.
yes.
And
Saying,
saying,
put it in.
"Come in my asshole."
Yes.
is what he says.
So now, so far in all of the wrestling I've seen, when butt stuff comes up, it's for one of two reasons. It's either a dumb joke about oh, we're trying to be funny, better have something about butts in there.
The Vince McMahon special, yes.
Or the other Vince McMahon special, where it is some sort of very overt piece of homophobia, where it's just supposed to be about male insecurity, about what butt stuff could mean, and I was starting to get and I started to write down like a bit of a rant that I would have, where it's like, wrestling, like so much of the time it wants to have it both ways, where it's like really homophobic and really homoerotic. And then one guy comes over and he jams his thumb into the Japanese wrestler guy's ass.
This had been a recurring gimmick with Champa, where he would violate his opponents in such a way.
Particularly Chuck Taylor.
Chuck Taylor, who
Over the past 2 years.
who I think at the very beginning of the match is like, "You ain't putting your thumb in my ass," and Champa says, "Brother Dustin, I knew you'd come."
So at first I was like, and once he actually gets it in there, I was like, wow, hey, at least they're taking this gag all the way.
Champa sells it like it hurts, like
Yeah.
Well, right,
Liger
his thumb
squeezes
hurts
his
it.
butt.
His ass.
He does the
Right,
thumb
his
like,
thumb
ha,
hurts,
I
yeah.
got him, and then Liger stands up straight and flexes his glutes, and he's got him.
Well,
you know?
I really thought
Yeah.
it was going to be like, there's a scene in the Venture Brothers where where Brock Sampson is being held captive, and he gets one of the guild guys to come over, and he's like, "Oh, you guys want the key? Like, I'm hiding it in my ass." And one of the guild guys goes and puts his hand up Brock's ass to find the key, and then Brock clenches his butt and then beats all of the other guys to death using the guy who's trapped in his butt now.
And actually, so that's relevant to the
fantastic.
whole Joey Ryan penis wrestling thing, because there's this wrestler in Japan, Danshoku Dino, and his gimmick is that he sexually assaults his opponents. Everyone loves it in Japan. And they did it in DDT in fucking Queens during WrestleMania weekend, and everyone there loved it too. So he grabbed Joey Ryan's junk like he does.
Just straight up full on ball claw in front of you, like, I gotcha.
But instead of Joey Ryan freaking out or selling it like it hurt or whatever, he started like hulking up.
Yeah, he started flexing
He started
his muscles.
flexing
you
his
know.
muscles as if he was the one who was trapping Dan Shokodino's hand on his penis and testicles. And then he made a sort of swinging motion and flipped Dan Shokodino with his penis. And that went so fucking viral that is Ryan's entire gimmick now. He makes like enough money to have turned down major wrestling contracts.
Wow.
Just being the guy who with the like fucking iron penis.
He does that in every one of his matches, and it's always like whenever he wrestles like a legacy wrestler, an older wrestler, especially somebody who would like complain openly about that, they're like, he's not going to do the penis spot. Oh my God, he is.
Except
He is.
Jerry Lawler
What?
didn't want to do. So what he did was he just threw a fireball at his dick and beat him.
think Ken Shamrock even took
Ken
it.
Shamrock took it.
Yeah,
I'll
come on,
accept
man.
Lawler just knowing his, whatever else we complain about Jerry Lawler. Knowing Lawler's character for 45 years, he'd totally just throw a fireball at his dick. and
Here's
beat
what
him.
Lawler said about it too. I had a heart attack in one of my recent matches. I'm not getting a heart attack off of a fucking dick flip.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to do
Fair.
that.
Most of his opponents do it as casually as Chuck Taylor stuck his thumb up Kendrick's butt in this
What?
match. He just walks up and sticks it in. He's like,
Anyway, so all 10 of these guys line up behind each other and stick their thumbs up each other's butts, and then Liger starts dancing around the ring, dragging them
like
all
a
with him.
locomotion.
I was really
kinda.
hoping they would meet and he would end up sticking his thumb up the last guy's ass, but
Well, there was a real
that was
progression
Peach
here where, like the one guy, puts his thumb in his ass, and I was like, okay, this is still going to be either something dumb or something homophobic, but at least they're kind of committing. And once it was like the fourth guy had his thumb in the ass, I was like, wait a minute, this is genius butt stuff. This is just true absurdity. This is one of the most absurd things, pieces of humor I've ever seen in a match. And then, I guess to the point where all 10 of them are in a conga line, prostate exam conga line that I thought was amazing.
and it ends in a big hip toss, just like the Joey Ryan penis stuff, which, by the way, that is called the U-Porn Plex, which is sponsored by U-Porn.
And then it segues into, so the Japanese guy also has time powers.
Oh,
I
maybe
guess
he
he had a remote.
control.
He had a remote
pulls out
control.
a
That's what
remote
it was.
control.
Okay.
Chuck Taylor is the one who has the time powers because
Ah.
2 years previous to this, after Champa stuck his thumb up his butt, he said, "Whoa, slow it down." And from there on, everything went in slow motion. The following year, the fans chanted, "Whoa, slow it down." And then the
So-
process repeated. So it kind of innovated as the years went on. Now they have a remote.
The slow-mo wrestling spot has been around for quite a while in the indies. I'm pretty sure the first time I saw it was in Chikara. But, Doc, you were telling me it came from Darren Corbin?
He's the first guy I ever saw do it, and I've seen him do it in most of the matches I've seen him do, or I've seen him have featured in. If anyone wants to correct us, please do. I'd love to know when the beginning of the slow-mo spot is. But the one in this match, it was done so well. The crowd got into it and did it.
That's really what made it, is that once the crowd starts doing the slow-mo chant,
Yeah.
This is awesome.
it reminded me of when we watched Bryce Remsburg,
Invisible
the
Wrestlers
two
match.
Invisible
Yeah,
Wrestlers
yeah.
match,
Fantastic.
where that was made by the crowd seeing what was happening and just immediately knowing what to do.
The real spectacle here is that if one person moves in real time, the spot's almost ruined, in the crowd, and everybody is committed to this angle. It's incredible.
And the best part is it's fucking Liger.
Oh, yeah. Jushin Liger.
It's
Well,
the cherry on the cake.
Liger always got it. He knows what to do.
But yeah, I think what I am most taken with in indie wrestling so far is the connection that the crowd has to the show, and just how ready the crowd is to be part of the show.
Yeah.
And in a way that is not invasive. You know what I mean?
very
where
respectful.
they do it as if they were at fucking rehearsal and can just come in right at the right time.
It's insane because there's no guardrail. They're
Yeah.
right on the ring. They're breathing distance from the ring.
Here's the thing is, as I've pointed out a number of times on this podcast, the crowd is always part of the show.
Yeah.
It's just in indie wrestling, they get to do more. They're not just extras.
I mean, you think it's like, it's this wrestling. I mean, it's not that different than if you go to a music show that has 200 people in it for a band that has that 200-seat venue jam packed with their most hardcore fans, and there'll be fans jumping on stage and singing into the mic if the singer wants them to, and they're as much a part of the show there also. For the most part, and there are exceptions, nobody's going to jump on stage and tackle the bass player because then the show has to stop. Now, occasionally unfortunately, in wrestling, somebody will come up and try and attack one of the guys, and that never ends well because most wrestlers will then just start beating the crap out of that fan, and most of the fans watching are like, that's what you get. Not as much now as it used to because everyone is so litigious.
It did happen to Bret Hart at the Hall of Fame ceremony,
God.
and immediately the Revival jumped that guy. Yeah.
The Revival and the rest of the entire WWE roster, that was
Rightfully
so
so.
stupid.
Rightfully so.
rightfully
On
so.
the litigiousness thing, it's like that's one of the coolest things about indie wrestling is it's a place where they don't have to be so litigious because you can trust the crowd to fucking behave themselves. Not every indie wrestling crowd, but PWG knows their crowd enough that they know they can do all sorts of shit.
I remember distinctly at one of the first Ring of Honor shows we went to at the Rexplex in New Jersey, if you remember that place. There was some crazy brawl into the crowd, and I think the Carnage crew were there, and they were setting up chairs and tables and so on, and the crowd was into it. And somebody from the crowd didn't touch one of the wrestlers. They grabbed one of the chairs and, like, moved it, and, like, Tony DeVito went up to him and was just staying in character, just looked at him, put the chair back, and was like, never move something a wrestler puts down. It is a safety thing. We know what we're doing, and that was it. I doubt that guy ever messed with a wrestling match.
Different approach than Super Dragon would take in that situation.
Yes, that's true. And you'd think,
Throw the chair at the guy.
Tony DeVito is such a rugged dude. You'd think, oh, he'll just punch it. No, Tony DeVito's a worker. He knows what he's doing.
Did Champa do the "I believe I can fly" spot?
Yes.
Yes, the extended
That,
one, and the crowd
That
sang
wouldn't have gotten over as well. Like a couple years.
No,
later.
I had to double check the year. That I was just like, okay, I guess this was one of the last years where you could do that
somebody
with
said to
plausible
me,
deniability.
Somebody said online when like R. Kelly was in the active process of being kind of erased from a lot of pop culture, is like, can we at least keep "I Believe I Can Fly"? And I thought, we can only if you're actively watching Space Jam at the time.
Yeah,
That's the only context now, because you can't do that. But otherwise, like, just stop playing it on the radio.
You can pirate it. Exactly.
You
can use it and not pay him.
Hey, really messed up people make really great art, and if you don't think so, you haven't seen a lot of really great art, or at least you don't know what your favorite artists get into. But that's a whole other podcast, I think.
So the end of the match, we see this parade of finishers. Everybody gets to hit their finisher, ending with the Jushin Liger Brainbuster to end it. I just want to comment. In his day, Liger was this incredibly innovative junior heavyweight or light heavyweight. He's the first guy I think I ever saw, not the first guy I saw do a shooting star press, but the earliest shooting star press I've ever seen was by him. It's a move where you jump forward and then flip backward in the air.
It's essentially a gainer, if you know what that is. Okay, yeah. Basically
Yeah.
how Ben described it.
It's a gainer in like diving into a pool. You do a backflip while moving forward.
Okay.
Defying all laws of gravity.
Yeah,
it looks that way, yeah. I think the first person Kidman. Kidman was the first guy I saw.
Mark Merrow.
I was going to say Mark Merrow, but I'm pretty sure I saw Kidman do it.
Evan Bourne.
Evan Bourne, there he had a beautiful one.
Yeah.
He just went up in the sky and stayed there.
But at this point, Liger's offense is pretty much the shote, which is a palm strike to the face, and the brainbuster, and maybe the Blue Thunder power bomb.
Yeah. Well, he was already like 50, and like once again, you can't tell because he's in his mask.
Yeah, he's still wrestling to this day. I think his last match is going to be a Wrestle Kingdom
at the
this
Tokyo.
year.
Yeah, this is his retirement year.
Or so
tour.
he claims.
We'll see.
Well, Keishan Liger came back for a time being. That was interesting. That was real interesting.
One of the things about Liger is he's so dressed up and he looks kind of older now, so like his body isn't obviously impressive from the outside. I was at Wrestle Kingdom last year, and there was a guy outside the arena, and I did not know if he was Jushin Liger or a Jushin Liger impersonator. I really couldn't tell.
I will relay a message from not a message, a story that my old tag team partner in WUW, Johnny Rods' promotion, had once, where he went in for good old cousin Simon. He's wrestling as Simon McGee these days. Good guy, recovering from a knee surgery. Anyway, he said he went into training one day, and there were a couple of like older Japanese businessmen-looking guys in Johnny's office. He recognized one of them as Tiger Hattori, official from New Japan. It was right when New Japan did that like first show in New York several years ago that we went to. And, he talked to Johnny for a little while, like you do before you go train. And they were like, yeah, because they know Johnny, because Johnny's been in the business 150 years or something. I might be off by 5 or 6 years. And they were like, we're gonna take some publicity shots, like in the ring. It's like, okay.
I'm looking it up now. It is 144 years.
144, man.
Yeah.
He's.
I mean, he
Still
himself
getting it,
is like 338, but he started late.
Something like that. And
he lives in Yoda years.
So these two guys, they like retreat to the locker room, and Simon goes into the ring and gets warmed up. And then the locker room door opens, and Tiger Hattori comes out, and Jushin Thunder Liger comes out. Because that was the other guy. You have no idea, when he's around, because he's just a middle-aged Japanese dude in a suit. And usually, because he's been a businessman for years with his own brand. And that's a little broader piece of advice to anyone in wrestling. Like, you don't know who's in your locker room and who's in your school. It doesn't even have to be masked guys. A lot of people unmasked are very low key otherwise. A lot of other people might be very well respected in your region, but were never nationally famous. Chances are, if somebody's talking to your trainer and the trainer's talking to them like their buddy, respect them first, and the good things will come to you.
I'd say just be nice to fucking everybody. Like, God knows who's some dude. Anyway, there was some dude on the train, and like he was talking to me, and I was like, this guy is like, why is he talking to me? And he turned out he was like the South African consulate or some shit. Like
Right. Well, you never know who you're going to run into on the subways of New York. I saw a guy a couple of weeks ago, like in the middle of the night, and he had like a full, like, not a Casio keyboard, one of the other, like a Hitachi or something. Like, it was a large piece. And I thought, oh, what's this guy? And he has enough space. He sets it up, and he starts like playing well and singing really well. And he was like a balladeer. He starts singing like "Hello" by Lionel Richie, and he sings "In the Air Tonight," and it was like absolutely beautiful. He makes like $15, and he's like, "That's great, another $10. I can get a room tonight." Packs up his keyboard and goes to the next place. So it's just I love the subway in New York most of the time.
I will defend Showtime to the death.
Yeah.
Because even if sometimes you're not in the mood for it, even if sometimes it's a little too loud, like, fucking move somewhere else where it doesn't happen then, okay? This is New York City. You're going to get break squads just showing up in your fucking... And I'm old enough to think of them as break squads. I don't know what the current terminology is.
If you like them, tip them. If you don't tip them, they're only going to look at you for half a second and move on to the next person.
I've never seen anyone get kicked in the face. I'm sure it's happened, but I've never seen it.
Happened.
Yo, I'm surprised we haven't seen a Showtime gimmick in wrestling yet.
It's very local.
In New York indie wrestling.
That's true.
It would be a smash hit in New York indie wrestling.
I think so.
All right. So we got any pluggables to plug? Any final thoughts?
Justin, first,
tell us about your radio show, where we can hear you, and thank you for coming on the show.
You can find me on 90.3 FM, the Long Island station. I am a co-host of Takedown Breakdown on WHPC. You can also find me on Twitter at Mark, M-A-R-K, A-R-T-I-C-U-L-O. That is not my name. I'm aware of that. I'm just a Mark. That's pretty much everything that I needed to plug. I'm now going to have Professor Abelson help me with my philosophy homework before I head out of here tonight. Thank you guys for having me on the show.
Oh, dude. It was great to
coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us the challenge of PWG. It's quite a story and a nut to crack, but they're great.
That's actually, thank you for reminding me why I'm here. Ben, so what's the consensus? Have we determined yet? Or do I have to come back for a Ring of Honor episode?
I mean, maybe you should. It's hard because, I was there live for all these great Ring of Honor moments that I loved. I still do think that in terms of the storylines that they ran and like some of the major title runs, they're still like those still stand out to me as better. But again, I haven't seen enough PWG is really what it comes down to. I need to watch a lot more to get some of the broader context. I've seen Ebola here or there, I've seen some matches, I've seen some shows, but to really, you really need to be completely immersed in a wrestling product before you can really judge it, I think.
For me and for the matches that I've seen so far, I enjoyed these PWG matches more than I enjoyed any of the Ring of Honor matches we have watched thus far.
Well, we've only really shown you two or three, right?
Yes, but at least one of them Yeah,
Joe Kobashi.
Joe Kobashi.
Well, show me Joe Kobashi, and then we also watched for the premium episode we're gonna record later. I watched the Joe Low-Key match. We
You
watched
got to
one of the
see
bad-
Danielson, Kenta. But again, I think overall you will like PWG better.
Yeah.
Because it does have more comedy. It has more.
It's very modern, you know.
Yeah.
I'd say like PWG does the thing that Ring of Honor did the best in the 2000s and the 2010s. You know, whereas Ring of Honor, I find, has slipped a lot over the last 10 years. PWG has not.
I think Ring of Honor is for people who are more hardcore wrestling fans than I'll ever be.
That's
at
fair.
this point.
Possibly.
I think it is for people who are like really serious.
Yeah.
Like students of it, where it's like, and I just don't know if I'm ever going to get to
definitely.
that point. Like,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Well, thanks to Highspots, now you have access to the last 15 years of PWG.
Oh, all right, awesome. Yeah, I am gonna have
You got a
to.
lot to catch up on.
Yeah, I'm
man.
gonna have to fucking
PWG
catch up. Yeah.
always had a lighthearted vibe.
Yeah.
and I love
So-
that. Like it's
What's the difference between Southern California and like Philadelphia and New York, where Ring
That's-
of Honor like
Very
Totally.
accurate.
Like-
Yeah.
Ring of Honor's like, we're gonna have the best ever, and you're gonna love it, and we're gonna chant. It's gonna. And PWG is like, come on down to the building, buy a pitcher of beer. We got these cool dudes.
I was gonna say,
And like this 10-man tag, I just want to point out here, everybody in that match has been signed by a major company. Every single one of them.
yeah.
And I'm-
well, you know, depending on what you count as a major
Well,
company.
Jeff Cobb, you might be thinking like he's been in AAA and in New Japan and all of that, even if it's not just Impact.
I was thinking more of Sammy Callahan or.
Well, Sammy Callahan put his time in NXT, even if he's like an Impact now. Sammy Callahan's a major player. He's a bit of an irregular. I think he's tough to deal with, but I don't know. I've never met him. I can tell you. But like, there's the amount of talent sticking their thumbs up each other's asses for fun.
Amazing.
That's Southern California versus New York.
and
I think.
I would also guess that being somewhat Hollywood adjacent, like I
Yeah.
bet like half that crowd has a theater degree. So which
or our big time Hollywood celebrities like Gillian Jacobs and freaking Adam Jones from Tool.
Yeah.
Frequented
Before
pretty
she started
regularly.
wrestling, like
She's not a
Ronda
Hollywood
Rousey
celebrity.
used to be spotted in the crowd a lot with her buddies.
And as Justin pointed out earlier, Luke Perry was there watching his son
Right,
Jack
right.
Perry.
Alrighty, this has been Contesting Wrestling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow us on Twitter at ContestingW.
Yes.
And if you'd like a whole other episode every week, we put one on our Patreon for $5 a month, where you can get our episodes several weeks in advance. And we do a bonus episode every week. If you like us, we already have, by the time you listen to this, there'll be over a dozen premium episodes available to you. We do a lot of good stuff on there. Please consider supporting us. The whole Patreon pitch. It'll get us better equipment, etc., etc. We like doing this. Please help us out.
And we even have a $1 thank you tier where
do.
you get to hear episodes 2 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
And then if you go the full $5, you get the premium episode and you get episodes 4 weeks in advance.
And Justin, as wrestling fans are wont to chant, please come back.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
seriously, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would love to.
Alrighty. Thank you.